We were waiting. There was lots of urging for Donald Trump to make some sort of address. He made it. What did you make of it?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty extraordinary atmosphere all around. I mean, what's striking really is just the sheer nihilism of the atmosphere in the United States. It's not clear that there is any purpose or any agenda to what's happened on American streets, and it's all equally clear that there's nothing that's bringing government sentiment together either. There's President Trump himself doesn't seem to have any instinct to try to unify. He's really just trying to, I guess, amplify what sets different factions and different people apart.
The other thing, I guess, that strikes us watching this from afar, both sides to some degree. Now, you get the level of distress from people in the African American community in particular, another death in custody of this sort, and the very slow wheels of justice after that, or no wheels for the police officers other than the main perpetrator so far. You see the violence sometimes of protesters, more so on property, but also some of the brutal police tactics. It just seems like it means this pressure and this tension ratchets up and up. I mean, Twitter threads are just, video after video of these incredible crackdowns and such violent behaviour. It makes it hard to see how it's going to end.
And of course, I think it's impossible to really understand what's going on without taking social media into account. I mean, I think that's driving it to a great extent. I know you just showed, you just had some reference before I came on to what's happening in New Zealand. It's extraordinary to me that American domestic politics should be reaching as far away as New Zealand. I mean, it's not to say that justice for Black Americans is an unworthy cause, but there are so many worthy causes, and I can't imagine, for instance, thousands of New Zealanders hitting the streets for, to support the cause of the Uyghurs, for instance, or many other worthy causes around the world. So it's pretty extraordinary the role that social media is playing in all of this. If I could just briefly strike a slightly personal note here. The last time, many of your viewers will have seen me on your programs before. The last time I actually came into the studio was in early March, just before the lockdown. And at the time, coronavirus was really hitting China very hard. We had that massive lockdown in Wuhan, and people were already worried that the United States wasn't going to cope very well. And I remember saying at the time, I think it was to Annalise Nielsen, one of your colleagues, that the United States might be very slow. Historically, it has been very slow in the way it's responded to crises and to wars, and for instance. But when they do get in, they get in a big way, and the machinery of American government comes into play. That massive scientific and technological establishment comes into play, and they really make their presence felt. I think now, from the perspective of early June, what I'd have to acknowledge is that hope was really misplaced. And what's notable now, not just with regard to COVID-19, but really the United States facing a twin crisis now, coronavirus and the protests and the riots on the city streets. You'd have to say, looking at this from today's perspective as opposed to early March, is the overwhelming failure of American state power, and that the hope that I had that scientific and technological establishment would also make itself felt, that just simply hasn't happened yet.
Well, yeah, that's certainly accurate. And when does it kick in, if indeed it does? The big thing here for people, and why this all kicked off, of course, was this feeling is that it clearly wasn't a one-off incident. It's the police culture in some parts of the US. It's been striking, on the other hand, what we're beginning to see, some of the few times that things are actually calming down over there. There's a police officer, he appeals from his heart or her heart to the crowd around them and often take a knee at the end of it. And the instant calming effect that's having on people, juxtaposed with military helicopters right now over Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the importance of trust, trust in institutions and in the individuals that run them and that lead them. And I think it's been a trend really around Western democracies generally, maybe most of all in the United States, but in Western democracies generally, is that there's been this slow erosion of the connection between the public and government. So really slowly since the 1970s, you could date it to, but maybe even earlier, you've got this creation of a really political class that has separated itself from society. And that has, I think, eroded trust in government and in institutions.
We're just getting live pictures in from Washington, D.C., of course, where some hours now, more than 4 hours after curfew, so anyone right now will essentially be able to be arrested on the street. It appears to be happening there. Thankfully, so far, we don't seem to be seeing a lot of the violence, albeit there was a lot earlier, in particular, a very harsh crackdown to see Donald Trump head off to that church and hold up a Bible in front of it and say that his only comment was America is still great. What does this mean for the US? Does this feel era-defining, Sam? It's not just this particular moment. A lot of people are tying this into COVID-19. Indeed, a lot of people, even within the movements, are not necessarily talking much, for example, about Donald Trump and his attitude, but how they feel completely left behind. We know it's a country with less of a safety net. And does it actually become a lesser country in the following, I don't know how long that would last for, but is there a real danger it slips not just in a temporary sense, but in a more permanent one, and what that means about its world power status even?
Right. Well, I mean, the first thing I'd say is that it's possible the worst is yet to come. I mean, the economic pain from the shutdown that the United States has been through over the last few months, the worst of that is still ahead. So there's a major recession coming. And it's possible also, of course, that as a direct result of these marches, that we see a second spike of COVID cases in the United States, simply because social distancing has been abandoned. So that's quite possible too. Well, for me, I think what this reinforces is the sense that overwhelmingly America's problems are domestic and not foreign. And so I've always been in the camp that has been skeptical that the United States is going to enter, a major Cold War-like state of conflict and competition with China, the new rising power. I've always been skeptical about that idea, simply because I don't think there's enough in it for the United States to want to fight a struggle like that over many generations against an adversary that's going to be much more powerful than the Soviet Union ever was. Events like this and events like the response to the coronavirus really just reinforce to me the sense that America has much bigger challenges at home than it does out there in the Asia Pacific. And so in turn, what that means for Australia is that we are much more on our own than we thought we were.
Sam Roggeveen, appreciate your thoughts on a pretty dramatic day. What's happening right now in the US. Thank you.